Okay. A very good afternoon to all of you present here today in this ICPR sponsored 3-day long national webinar on comparative aesthetics, philosophical perspectives from the East and West, organized by the Department of Sanskrit, Cooch, Behar, Panchanan, Barma University, West Bengal. Today is the second day of our webinar. We have two important lectures today, one by Professor Sri Rajendran and the other one is by Professor Bijoya Goswami. Let me first introduce our first speaker, Professor Sri Rajendran sir. Professor Rajendran is one of the most celebrated professors of Sanskrit in the country. He completed his bachelor and master degrees in Sanskrit Sahitya with first class first rank in both in both the programs, and then went on to do his PhD on Mahimabhatta's Vyakti Viveka from University of Calicut, Kerala in 19, and he completed the program in 1983. With 38 years of long and illustrated teaching career, he retired as the professor of Sanskrit from the University of Calicut, Kerala. He wrote more than 36 books and 200 articles in different reputed journals of India and abroad. Some books by him are worth mentioning: The Traditional Sanskrit Theatre of Kerala, from the University of Calicut in 1989, a study of Mahimabhatta's Vyakti Viveka in 1991, Abhinaya Darpana text with study and Malayalam translations in 1992, a transcultural approach to Sanskrit poetics in 1994. He also contemporary approaches to Indian philosophy, edited book by him in 2000. Then Saundarya Sastram from the State Institute of Languages, Trivandrum. For the book, he has won G.N. Pillai Endowment Award in 2002, and the list goes on. Many awards and honors have been received by Professor Rajendran for his illustrated career and for his contribution to the Sanskrit and Malayalam language. Some of these are, just a minute. Yeah, Sanskrit Samskrita Bhasha Vibhushanam in 1993, award for the best literary critic, Kerala Sahitya Academy, from the Kerala Sahitya Academy, Trichur in 2001 for the work Pathabhum Porulum. I think it's in Malayalam language. Then I have already told that G.N. Pillai Endowment Award from the Kerala Sahitya Academy for the work Saundarya Sastram, Ramakrishna International Sanskrit Award, Canada 2002 for outstanding and distinguished contributions to Sanskrit teaching and research, I.C. Chacko Endowment Award, Kerala Sahitya Academy for the best work in linguistics in 2007, and likewise the list goes on. He has traveled to various foreign universities as well, where where invited talks were delivered by him. The universities are University of Helsinki, University of Milan, University of Warsaw, Cambridge University, Silpakorn University, Bangkok, Brussels University, Leipzig University, National University of Singapore, and so on. The list is very long, so I skip it. Now I request Professor Rajendran sir to please come forward and deliver his lecture. The title of his today's lecture is The Language of Imagination, Aspects of Kuntaka's Aesthetics. Professor Rajendran. Thank you.
Namaskar. Thank you, Dr. Soumyajit Sen, for the kind words you have spoken about me. It is my pleasure to be with you. Bengal has got a special place in the hearts of all people of Kerala. I have visited Calcutta several times, but not your place. So maybe it is a happy occasion, at least to meet you online. So I will be speaking about Kundagas. Am I audible? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I thought of making a PowerPoint presentation. So please allow me to present. That is it already there? I think so. So I will have that presentation, and we will be having an occasion to understand Kundaga from a closer point of view. Thank you. Can you see it? Hello? Hello?
It's coming. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, the language of imagination, aspects of Kundaga's aesthetics. This is a title we have, Soumyajit Sen and myself had decided. So, Kundaka, is a very important figure in Sanskrit poetics because of his originality, and even in contemporary times, his theory is well acclaimed all over the world. So, because he has something very new to say. After Avanandavardhana's Dhunyaloga, it was very difficult to say something new in Sanskrit poetics, because Anandavardhana had exhausted all possibilities. But Kundaka came later, and he has a totally different perspective of poetics and aesthetics. So let us see what Kundaka says. Kundaka says, uh, there is a very famous author in Western literary theory, Tilliard. Tilliard once said that all poetry is more or less oblique. There is no direct poetry. Exactly the same thing Kundaka has proven through his Vakrokti Jivita. He says that Vakrokti, this obliquity, that is the very pranan, that is the very life of all poetry, all creativity. And there is no direct poetry. If you say something directly, there is no poetry. That is why Kundaka does not recognize even Swabhavokri as a figure of speech. What art is there? If there is to be art, there should be some obliquity. There should be some deviation. There should be some strangeness in language. This is his considered opinion. That is, he has mentioned it is this Tilliard has mentioned it in a very celebrated, famous book, Poetry, Direct and Oblique. And the same, somewhat different manner, there was a Russian formalist called Viktor Shklovsky. He belonged to the beginnings of the 20th century. And Shklovsky says that defamiliarization is the very essence of art. What is defamiliarization? That is, all of us, you come to the university, you meet your friends, you go to the class. At that time, everything will be very familiar to you, and you will not find anything striking. But when you are an author, you are a novelist, you are writing about your classroom, at that time, what happens? You have to present all these things as if they are not familiar, as if they are new. So this is defamiliarization. So this is also very similar to Kundaga's theory of Vakrokti, because in Vakrokti, everything appears to be new. Everything appears to be different. Everything appears to be strange. So from all this, we can see that Kundaga's theory is very much relevant even in contemporary literature. Now, let us have a closer look at Kundaga's theory, Kundaga's concept of poetry. Kundaka, at the very outset of his Vakrokti Jivita, he says that there are two methods in literature. One, methods in presentation of things. One is, I will, maybe it is to understand, let us have a, what he says. He says that yatha tattvam vivechyante bhavaha trailokyavartinaha yadi tanna albhudam nama daivaraktahi kinchukaha. So manishigevadha tattvam ye tesham yatharuji stapyade praudhimatram tat paramarthona tadrisha ityasat tarka sandarbhe स्वतंत्रेप्यकृतादरः साहित्यार्थ सुधा सिंधोः सारम उन्मीलयाम्यः. So very, very confident Kundaka, you can see. I am going to unveil the secret, the essence of poetry. So he says, what does he say? There is the essence of creative literature, striking a middle course between extreme objectivity of scientific discourses and the unbridled subjectivity of imagination. That is, in a scientific discourse, you will be describing things very accurately. Daivaraktahi kimsugaha. The kimsugas are by the palasha flowers are red by nature. So suppose somebody says palashaha raktaha, there is no strikingness. That is only a matter of a description. But at the same time, the other extreme will be you use your own imagination and you flout all the norms and you create something new. Then that also will not be acceptable. So what we have to do is that on one hand, there is the objective description. On the other hand, there is the subjective imagination. So a real poet or a real poetician should strike a middle course between these two things. So he asked, what is the use of repeating the well-known facts as saying that the flower of the kimchuga tree is reddish? On the other hand, if one totally discards objective facts and goes in one's own way, that will also be not acceptable. So he says that he has steered clear of both these extremes. Asat tarka sandarbhe sodandrevi akritadaraha aham. So, and combined the essence of philosophical truth, tattva, and creativity, nirmiti, in writing his book. So, what Kundaka is saying is that literature is based on life, reality, but at the same time, it is not a photography of life. The imagination of the poet also, the creativity of the poet also comes with the raw material that is found in our life. The poets make something new. And then he says that conventional works on poetics have failed to identify the real striking feature of poetic art, which alone is capable of generating aesthetic delight. So Kundaka says that there should be this sahridaya ahladagatva, that without this type of delight being caused, there is no use of poetry. Poetry has to delight the audience. And how is it possible? In our real life, we do not have this type of aesthetic delight. In poetry, we have got this delight because there is the poetic art and the creativity of the poet. And because of that, poetry becomes quite enjoyable, and then it will be able to function properly. So he wants to show us. He says that my aim of writing Vakroti Jivida is to fulfill this one. There should be a treatise, a text, a manual, which shows you how to make use of the creativity in changing the language, in changing everything, the shabda and the artha, and designing something new. This is his aim. Okay. അഭിജയ് ഞാനൊരു ഓൺലൈനിലാണ് ഞാൻ പിന്നെ വിളിക്കാം കേട്ടോ.
Excuse me, sir.
Sorry.
So could you please change the slides? We are only seeing the first one, the title one.
Okay. Only the title one.
Yeah.
Oh. Let me see.
Sir, please click on the second one.
Yes. Can you see the language of imagination, aspects of Kundakasa aesthetics?
No, sir, it's not coming.
Why? What do
Yeah,
you see
right.
now?
Yes, second one, significance of Kuntaka's theory.
Yes, but you cannot see in an enlarged thing, right?
No, no, no. So,
So,
so you have to, sorry, you have to open the full page. When you are presenting, you have to present the full page.
okay, now can you see
No, no,
the,
sir. You
the
have to
full
cut.
page?
No, no.
What to do? I don't know.
Sir,
I have used the full page, but
but
uh,
still, it's okay, sir.
this is okay.
This is okay. Absolutely. Second page is
Okay,
showing.
okay. Now the third one.
Yeah, concept of poetry. Yeah,
Okay, sorry. I don't know why it is, but I think you will be able to see that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
don't worry. I will be sending you the presentation so that you can
Thank you.
have a record. Okay. Now, Kundaka first of all asked, what is the use of poetry? What is the function of poetry? So he says that if poetics has to be meaningful, poetry should also have some meaning. So poetry, he is sharing the traditional belief. Poetry in the past, you know the story of Panchatantra, how it was written uh, by the Brahmin Jivasiddhi for teaching princes. The same concept you can find everywhere. So Kundaga also shares the view. So it addresses kings and princes and other members of the royalty. They have to learn things. They are to be to rule the kingdom. So they have to be instructed, but they are lazy and they are not interested in shastras. So through poetry, it will be possible to instruct them. Poetry is a means of attainment of the aims of life, like virtue, so dharma, artha, and kama, and moksha. These things you have to teach through poetry. Even though he says these things, he says that the most important thing about poetry is aesthetic delight, which which it causes in the reader, and which should be regarded as a chief aim of poetry. So Kundaga does not have any doubt about this. Which is the most important element? Is it Vyulpatti or instruction, or is it Preeti or Ananda? Kundaga says it is Ananda, it is aesthetic delight. So poetry combines instruction with delight. So what happens through Shastras? You can learn Artha Shastra, you can learn Dharma Shastra, many other Shastras, but these Shastras are very tough. And when you learn them, you will be always very tired. But the same thing happens, the same knowledge you will be able to gain by reading poetry. If you read Raghuvamsha, you will be instructed in Dharma Shastras and Artha Shastra and many other Shastras. So that is how Kundaga looks at poetry. So instruction with a delight. So it is superior to scientific discourses, Shastras, which provide instruction in a cumbersome manner through difficult style. It is very difficult to learn Vyakarana, for example. But if you learn language properly, Kavya properly, all grammar will come to you automatically. There is a saying in Sanskrit, Prayoga Mandrena Nivaraniyaha Prayena Vyakaranaha Pishachaha. The grammarians are goblins. They will frighten you, but you can avoid them if you stick to usage, and you can understand usage through literature. This concept is there. So Kundaga makes use of this concept. Then, um, then sorry, function of poetry. Then he gives, what is poetry? He asks the second question. What is Kavya? What is Sahitya? Then Kundaga says that it is neither Shabda alone nor Artha alone. If it were Shabda, the mere beautiful sound without any deep meaning will be regarded as poetry. If it were mere meaning, then no beautiful sound, then it also cannot be regarded as poetry. So it should have been combined. There should be a Sahitya. So, so he says that mere outward felicity of phonetic structure is not enough to ensure that an expression is poetry. That is a poetic structure is there, Anuprasa is there, Bana Taruni, Ramana Mandira, Indra, Indu Smeramukhi, Gachasi, that words he takes. Then what is the meaning? What is it? It does not have any serious meaning. On the other hand, an expression which has got a very profound meaning, but if it is very difficult to understand the meaning because it is written in a difficult style, that also is not very commendable. There also he gives an example. I am not going to illustrate these examples because it will take a lot of time from us. Then raw ideas occurring to the imagination of the poet. That's very important. Are crude as an unpolished gem. They become charming only when they are polished. It is like a gem you dig from the earth, and it cannot be. It will be raw, but if you polish it properly, it becomes bright. And similarly, in the case of poets, also they will be getting all beautiful ideas, and these ideas have to be refined, and that can be uh, done by the imagination of the poet. Okay, then we come to, then he gives a totally different description to Sahitya. What is Sahitya? It is not enough to say, if we simply describe poetry as mere Sahitatva, togetherness of word and sense, because word and sense are always seen together. So what is the meaning of word and sense? Shabdartho, Sahido, Kavyam. It does not make any sense. So then if it were true, even ordinary sentences, they have got Shabda and Artha. They have to be regarded as Sahitya. So that is not the meaning of Sahitya. Sahitya occurs only in creative literature, and that has to be different from, that has to be distinguished from other linguistic usages as grammar or logic. So Kundaka says that Sahitya is Paraspara Spardhitva Lakshana. That is, Sahitya is Sahitya Manayor Shobhashalidam Prati Anyuna Anadikta Vartin Avasthidihi. So Sahitya means much more than mere togetherness. It is a competitiveness. The sound will be competing with the meaning. The meaning will be competing with the sound to enhance the beauty. So the sound will be saying that I am more beautiful than the meaning. The meaning will be telling you that I am more beautiful than the sound. Such an existence is called Sahitya according to Kundaka. Then Kundaka says that Sahitya is not only not between Artha and Shabda and Artha. There is some sort of a Sahitya between Shabda and Artha and Artha. For example, if you have got a poem in which you have got several beautiful lines, but one line is flawed, then that there is no Sahitya. Similarly, if you read poetry, everything is okay, but there is suddenly some problem, some meaning is not very good. At that time, then what happens? There is no Sahitya between Artha, one Artha and another Artha. So, for example, there is a famous poem where Sita is asking Rama. She has volunteered to go with Rama to the forest, but from the Ayodhya, precincts of Ayodhya itself, she is asking Rama, "Oh, how much time distance we have to cover?" She has not even gone further. At that time, and Rama started weep. His eyes became tearful. Rama Srana Pratham Kridavati Prathamavadaram. So then the Kundaka says that there is Sita herself had volunteered with Rama, and now at the very first instance, she is saying, she is asking several times, and she is what you call disturbing Rama. This is not proper for a person like Sita. So Asakrit Bruvana should be changed as Karunam Bruvana or something like that. Then this Sahitya, this Artha becomes more dignified. So we have to be very careful about the meaning of poetry. Every segment should be complete by itself. Every segment should be beautiful by itself. This is the view of Kundaka. Okay. Then he says another thing. He says that the imaginative language is different from ordinary language. The word and sense of poetry are exclusive word and sense. That is, you have to select the correct word, the proper word, and the proper meaning. So, and not any word. Poetry is not you look at the dictionary and take some words and you write poetry. No, you have to search the word, proper word. An example, so Maupassant, you might have heard about the famous French short story writer Maupassant, who once said, whatever one wishes to say, there is one noun only by which to express it, one verb only by which to give life to it, one adjective only which will describe it. One must search until one has discovered them. So this is like that. So that is why Kundaka gives you exhaustive examples from Kalidasa's Raghuvamsha and Kumar Sambhava. For example, you know the well-known verse, Dayangadam Samprati Shojaniyadam Samagama Prarthanaya Kapalina Kalachasa Kantimati Kalavada Tomasya Logasya Netra Gaumudi. A very famous verse by Kalidasa. That is, Parvati is engaged in the penance. At that time, Shiva comes disguised as a brahmacharin, and he says that two things have become pitiful in the eyes of the world. One is the digital moon on the crest of Lord Shiva. The other is you yourself, who are the moonlight of the entire eyes. Because of both of you wanted to have the company of Shiva. For here, Shiva, Kalidasa could have used any word like Pinaginaha, etc., etc. But here, Kalidasa uses the word Kapalinaha. What do you mean by Kapali? Kapali is a person holding a Kapala, a skull. So that shows the what you call awful nature of Shiva, which is conducive to Bibalsarasa, and it enhances the beauty of the line, because Kalidasa has particularly selected the word Kapalinaha in this particular instance. Another example will be Sita in Raghuvamsha. Sita tells Lakshmana that when he forsakes, Lakshmana abandons Sita in the forest. Sita says, I have got a message. And Sita says, Vachyastoya Madvajanat Saraja. You tell that king that I have told him like this. Here, she is telling Lakshmana, you tell that king. Why does Kalidasa use the word Saraja? Usually Sita does not describe Rama as Raja. He is Aryaputra or he is Priya or whatever. But here Sita is so much depressed and angry with Rama that because Rama treats her not as his beloved, but as somebody, a stranger. So Sita also says Saraja. So for him, kingship is more important than his love relationship with me. All these things are described through this word Vachyastoya Madvajana Saraja. So you have to be very selective according to Kundaka. Then Kundaka says that the word used in poetry is that which alone can convey the intended, despite the availability of many similar words. You can have hundreds of words to describe Lord Shiva, but here Kalidasa has used the word Pinakinaha, not Kapalinaha, and that is because he finds something beautiful in that particular word. Sometimes the poet may wish to bring to the fore the generic nature of an object. Then a word too specific in its connotation will not suffice. All these things. For a general idea, you should have a word with a general meaning. For a special idea, you should have a word with a special meaning. All these things are very beautifully described by Kundaka. Then Kundaka says that aesthetical appeal of the sense of poetry, there will be several shades of meaning of an expression. However, in poetry, the sense associated with some features capable of generating aesthetic delight alone is welcome. So Kundaka says that when you describe things, you can describe everything, but see how Kalidasa is describing Sage Valmiki coming to the rescue and the abandoned Sita in the forest, who was weeping profusely. At that time, Kalidasa says, Tam Abhyagachat Rudidanusari Kavi Kushetmaharanaya Yadaha Nishada Vitha Andaja Darshanotha Shlogatvam Abadyada Yasya Shokaha. To her side did come, following her veil, the sage, collecting firewood and grass, whose woe, born out of the sight of a bird killed by the hunter, into words did blossom. So he was such a poet whose misery, whose sadness turned into a poem, whose sadness, that is the sight of a bird being hit by the hunter. So Kalidasa says that such is his heart, such a tender-hearted is Valmiki, and So even in the case of a bird, his heart melts. But then what will be the condition of the heart when it sees the plight of Sita, who is a human being, who is a friend of his, who is a daughter of his close friend? So all these things are brought out by Kalidasa by this single description. Now I come to Kuntaka's aesthetic philosophy. Uh, my lecture is a very long one, but it will take 3-4 hours. I don't want to do that. So I will concentrate on the gist. So what is the aesthetic philosophy of Kuntaka? Our present workshop is also focused on that. Kuntaka's hallmark of Kuntaka's concept of poetry is that poetic sound and sense should be united in a composition characterized by the oblique or figurative function. Vakraka vivyapara. That is, Kuntaka says that Shabdartho Sahido Vakraka vivyapara shalini bante vyavasthido. They should be united in a composition, bante vyavasthido, characterized by oblique or figurative function. Vakra kavivyapara. The kavivyapara, the poet's imagination, that is striking, that is vakra, that is oblique. Word and sense assume a figurative stamp from the poet's imagination, which makes them different from ordinary language. In ordinary language, you do not use your imagination. When you are reading a newspaper or when you are writing a letter, at that time you do not use your imagination. But when you are composing literature, you will be using imagination. At that time, everything will become as if through a magic touch, everything will become changed. It is this figurative mode of expression, fakrata, a unique form of linguistic expression, vijitraiva abhida, which constitutes the very essence of all poetry. All figures of speech are comprised under vakrokti. There are not elements added for extra beauty. So that is a stereotyped concept in Sanskrit poetics. That is, you have got poetry, then you add figures of speech, alangaras, just as you have got the human body and you add bangles and necklaces and other things. So this is a very wrong notion according to Kuntaka, because in the imagination, the Shabda and Artha, they are all always already fused with Vakrokti, with Alangara. So Alangara and Alankarya, they cannot be separated. They are separated just for convenience sake. Actually, they are one and the same. Alangara and Alangri. Alangridil Alangoraha Abodritya Vivechide. Tattung Salangarasya Kavyata. So that is for pedagogical purposes, for learning purposes, for in the classroom we make such a distinction. But in reality, they are one and they are inseparable. Kuntaka, then I have already described Sabhavokti. Kuntaka does not consider Sabhavokti because there is no Akrokti. Then Kuntaka speaks about 3 types of margas. I don't want to go deeper into it, but just one or two couple of sentences. Earlier poeticians like Vamana speak about 3 types of style, Vaidarbhi, Gaudiya, Panchali. Kuntaka says that this is quite wrong. And you cannot describe these styles on the basis of region. Region does not have anything with style. Style is connected with Kavis Swabhava. That is, there was a famous stylistician in Western literature called Buffon. Buffon once said, style is the man himself. Style is the man himself. You look at a person, he has got an actor, for example, like Amitabh Bachchan. He has got a style of his own. Nobody else can imitate that, even then like him, because it comes by in himself. Rabindranath Tagore has got a style of his. All great authors have got their own style. Kalidasa has got a style. So Kuntaka says that it is Kaviswabhava, and he speaks about 3 types of general styles, because it is not possible for us to go deeper and deeper into each individual style. So he generalizes them into 3 styles. So I am not going to go deeper into that. Now we come to more important aspects of Kuntaka's poetry: obliquity and creativity. Akrada and this creativity is Pratibha. Kuntaka takes the stand that one has to analyze the obliquity manifested in poetic language in order to fathom the creativity of the poet. The poet, you know what, Kalidasa has left nothing to us. accept his poetry. And if you read his poetry, analyze his poetry, you will understand his creativity, his pratibha, his genius. So it is through analysis of the poetic language that we can understand what is creativity. Modern stylisticians also take a similar stand, defining style as the deviation from the norm. That is, instead of plain speak, the author will say things in a very different manner, and that is deviation from the norm, and analyzing linguistic expressions to find out the nature and extent of deviation literary language manifests. For example, we say one moment ago I saw him, but a poet says a grief ago. Grief is sadness. A sadness ago. So that is something very different from ordinary expression. At that time, it will strike you. It will. There is some vakrata there, and you will think about it, and you will understand that this poet uses the word a grief ago because the life of that particular individual is full of miseries. So the standard of measurement is not minutes or second, but one grief, another grief, like that, third grief, like that. So that's an example. So Kundaga. Then there is a difference between ordinary modern stylistics and Kundaga. Kundaga always says that this style or this deviation is always caused by the poetic genius, creativity, and it has got a purpose. It wants to create strikingness, Vaichitriya. So what is Kundaga's Vakrokti? Vakrokti is the transformation language undergoes, and that is caused by Kavi Pratibha, and the aim of it is to create Vaichitriya in the mind of the Sahridaya, and through Vaichitriya, the Sahridaya gains aesthetic pleasure. So the very aim of Vakrokti is to create aesthetic delight in the mind of the reader. Now we come to the crux of Kundaga's theory. Kundaga says that we have to analyze the poetic language, and when you analyze the poetic language, we can see that there are 6 levels of figurativeness or vakrada. So at the very outset, what is the very the most surface level phenomenon of language is the sound or the phoneme, and so from phoneme we start the inquiry. So according to Kundaga, at the basic level there is the varna vinyasa, that is varna vinyasa vakrada. We can say it is called phonetic figurativeness. Other Alankarikas describe these as Anuprasa, Yamaga, etc. But Kundaga says that it is Varna Vinyasa Vakrada. So Anuprasa, Yamaga, etc. are all included in it. Then we have got Pada Purvartha Vakrada. That is, Pada has got 2 elements. Suptingandam Padam, you know, Sup and Ting are the suffixes, and the Pradipadika is the Prakriti, and Padapurva and Padapurvartha, and the strikingness of the Padapurvartha is called Padapurvartha Vakrada. We can say lexical, because that is the basic stem which you find in a dictionary. Then grammatical. Pratyaya is grammatical figurativeness. Then, so we have got phoneme. Then you have got the Padapurvartha, then Padaparartha or grammatical, the suffix. Then these words combine into sentences. So we have got sentential, Vakya Vakrada. Then we have got many sentences constitute a context. That is called Prakarana. And then many Prakaranas constitute a composition. That is Prabandha. So take, for example, Kalidasa's Shaguntalam or Raghuamsham. At the very basics, you have got Varna Vinyasa. Then you go deeper, you have got Pada, how Kalidasa has used the words, selected words. Then what are the peculiar grammatical suffixes which we have used. Then what are the sentences, all the figures which Alankaras are comprised under Vakya Vakrada, sentential. Then there are several contexts. So for example, that Nandini Prakarana, or then there are in Shagundalam, you have got this Dhivara Vrittanda. Then you have got this Mudra Vrittanda. Like many things are there. So all these are the different contexts, prakaranas, and take the composition as a whole, that is Prabandha Vakrada. So we can see, if you read Kuntaga, you can see that this is a very holistic, comprehensive concept of literature. Such a comprehensive concept you can find very rarely in Sanskrit poetics. Anandavardhana is an exception. But if you read earlier poeticians like Bhamaha, Vamana, etc., you do not have such a comprehensive picture of poetic language or poetic creativity. So 6 types of creativity. So the
Sir,
minimum, what is the
sorry,
logic? Hello?
sorry
Yeah?
for interrupting. Can I say something, sir?
Yeah, sure.
You can show just one page at a time. You can see below the home button, there is a button named from current slide.
Home button. What is it?
Below the home button,
Yeah.
in the status bar, left
Ah,
corner,
ah.
you can see a button named from current slide.
What is it? Could you repeat, please? There is a, you go back to that, which button? Which button?
No, sir. In the status bar, file, home, insert, in the below the menu bar,
Hmm.
you can see a button uh, in the position number 2. So just in the status bar, left corner, left side, in left side.
Left side.
Below this,
Uh,
there is a button called home.
home.
Home. Below the home button, you can see a button. There is written from current slide. Just you have to press that button. Left.
Okay. Let me see. Yes. Yes.
Just press this.
I have pressed it.
So
Okay,
we
sir.
have checked, Orpita, we have checked this, but it's not working. That's why
Okay,
we are going this right,
Okay, sir.
likewise.
Sorry.
Sir,
Okay.
Please continue. Sir.
Yes. So the logic behind this division is that the minimum unit of language is phoneme. Phonemes make words which consist of lexical stem and the grammatical suffix word, which consist of. Then words constitute sentences. Contexts are constituted by sentences, and composition is an aggregate of contexts. So that is the logic behind the 6 types of Vakrokti mentioned by Kuntaga. So Kuntaga says that what is phonetic figurativeness? That is Varna Vinyasa Vakrada, and all the Alankaras, all the Shabda Alankaras are under are covered by phonetic figurativeness. And there are many examples. He says that you have, Shabdanukarana, that is called onomatopoeia in English. Datyuha, Vyuha, Keli, Kuha, Kukhara, Rava, Kanda, Vanandaha. Datyuha, Vyuha, Keli, Kuha, Rava, Kanda, Vanandaha. Here, Kuha, sound of the Datyuha is being reproduced, and that is an example of phonetic figurative. Similarly, Gunjanti Manju Madhubaha Kamalagareshu. Gunjanti Manju Madhubaha. That is also an example of figurative, phonetic figurativeness. There are many such examples. In Kalidasa's Megasandesha, you have got the passage Kartum Yatcha Prabhavati Mahim Uchilindram Avantyam Tachrutva Te Shravana Subhagam Garjidam Manasavilkaha. You might have heard of this. That is, Kalidasa is describing the sound of the thunder here. Kartum Yacha Prabhavati Mahim. Then the sound itself becomes very symbolic. Uchilindram Avantyam Tachrutva. Here you hear the sound of the thunder. So that is that we can see in great poetry. If you read English poetry also, like John Keats, you find such examples. Bearded bubbles winking at the brim in Ode to a Nightingale. So that is universal. That is phonetic figurativeness. Now we come to lexical figurativeness. See, I'm sorry that I cannot describe these things elaborately, because within one hour you have to compress all these things. So lexical figurativeness is Pada Purvardhavartada. Here, this is the most important aspect of Kundaga's theory, because here you have got something called choice. The poet selects one word. There are thousands of other words, but he takes one particular word, as I have described in Raghuvamsha Saraja, or Pinaginaha, instead of Pinaginaha, Kapalinaha. So why does the poet choose a particular word? That is the lexical figurativeness, and to create some meaning that is it. The most important aspect of you can find in this Pada Purvardhavakrada, and no other poetician in Sanskrit has described Pada Purvardhavakrada in such a exhaustive manner. Now we come to there are many varieties. I am not going to explain them, but some of the examples given by Anandvardhana are examples of Pada Purvardhavakrada, like Pada Ravi Kirananugrihitani Bhavanti Kamalani. The lotuses become lotuses when they are graced by the rays of the sun. Or the king becomes a king when he rules properly. So the second king is an example of, according to Anandvardhan, it's an example of Dhuni. According to Kundaga, it is an example of Pada Purvardhavakrada. Anandvardhana uses the word Dhuni, Kundaga uses the word Vakrada. That is the difference. Then there are such examples: stylistic choice of words, metaphor, adjectives, veiled expressions, etc., are all there in this lexical figurativeness. Now, grammatical suffixes. Grammatical suffixes are very, very important. One example I can tell you: you use Parasmepada and Alpanepada in Sanskrit. Now we use indiscriminately. Originally, Parasmepada was used in the sense of doing something for other people. Alpanepada was used in the sense of doing it for ourselves. So in Kalidasa's Kumara Sambhava, there is a context. Here, Lord Shiva tells the Saptarshis, when the seven sages, I am going to marry, I want to marry the daughter, the Parvati. Here, this is conveyed by the Saptarshis, the sages, to Himalaya, and the sages Angiras tells Himalaya, Vrunude Varadas Shambhu. Vrunude Varadas Shambhu. Shambhu is courting, or he wants to court Parvati. Here, instead of using Vrunoti, Kalidasa uses Vrunute. Have you wondered why? You know, the story of Kumar Sambhav is that the gods want Shiva to discontinue his ascetic life and come back to real life. And for that, they ask Kama, Lord Cupid, to allure Shiva, but that does not work. Then Parvati practices heavy penance, and Shiva is ultimately conquered. At that time, Shiva really falls in love with Parvati. And now he says that he wants to marry her for my own sake, not for the sake of gods or other people. So if he had used Kalidasa had used the word Vrunoti, that would mean that Parvati is not very important. She is just sought by Shiva for the sake of the gods. But here, very categorically, Kalidasa uses the word Vrunute to show that there is a mutual love and respect and regard between Shiva and Parvati, and that is why Shiva comes all the way to seek the hand of Parvati. So such things are there in Sanskrit literature. You have to be very careful about Parasmevada and Alpanevada. In the case of Vayavadins, why a person uses Parasmevada or vice versa. Then there are many such examples. I don't want to give you many examples. Future Ajiral Bhavishyanti Kalaha. That is, the times will be very difficult. So you are anticipating something. So I am not going to do that. So then in grammatical figuratives, Sanskrit language is rich in grammatical figuratives. You can see the entire, Meka Sandesha is an example for that. What do you get there? There are several rivers. If Kalidasa was an English author, he would have described Reva, other rivers as only as rivers. But in Kalidasa treatment, the rivers become beautiful damsels. Why? Simply because in Sanskrit, Nadi is in feminine gender, and Reva, Narmada, and Ganga, all these are feminine. And we can say that this is all an example of grammatical figurativeness, and they are personified as beautiful women. A creeper is personified as a beautiful woman. A tree is personified as a very adept male being. Like that in Sanskrit, in entire Sanskrit literature, we can see this type of personification, an example of grammatical figurativeness. Now we come to Vakya Vakrada, and the entire gamut of alankaras, according to Kundaga, whether it is Upama, Rupaga, whatever. Then he scrutinizes all the alankaras in Sanskrit. And he says that some of them cannot be regarded as alankaras at all. For example, Swabhavakti, he does not consider it as an alankara. Hedu, Sushma, Lach, Lava, etc. These are not alankaras because there is no Vaichitriya there. So there should be some strikingness. And these all the time-tested figures like Upama, Rupaga, etc., are all regarded as Vakya instances of Vakya Vakrada. And Kundaga says that Vakya is a group of words, Padasamuha, and points out that the figurativeness related to it is thousandfold. Sahasra Dha. Sahasrada Vidyate, comprising all figures of speech. It is a permitting presence of imagination, pervading all elements. It is, and Kundaga says Vakrokti is like a painter's stroke that shines out distinctively from the beauty of the material used. Suppose you are an ordinary person, but you have drawn a picture and you give the same, painter's set to an artist. He also uses the same canvas and the same paints, but what a difference. What he does is something artistic. He has transformed the material is one and the same, but there is a soul in what he has done. So this is the case with the great poets. They change poetic language beyond recognition by infusing them with figurative turns of expression. There are many such examples. If I have got some time left, I don't know how much of time some Sen will give me. Now, there are examples I will later. Then we have got contextual figurative, that's the ingenuity of the plot, prakarana, techniques like the play within the play. Example, Bahubudhi's Uttaramacharita. Here, the scene where Sita is abandoned in the forest is presented as a Garbhanga, or an inner drama, a drama within a drama. That is Garbhanga in Sanskrit, a play within a play. Interestingly, Shakespeare also uses the same technique in his very famous play, Hamlet. In Hamlet, Prince Hamlet suspects that his father was murdered by his mother and his stepfather. In order to find it out, he uses a technique. He presents a drama, a play. At that time, all these people are invited for the drama, his stepfather and his mother. Here, the same scene, somebody being killed, is enacted. That is a play within the play. Because as Kundaga says that all the dramatic personae, all the characters in the drama become members of the audience, and then there is a drama. You can imagine the beauty of it. And then the king, the stepfather, cannot withstand that. He leaves that place. And at that time, Hamlet understands that he has really killed his father. That is one example in Sanskrit literature. We have got many such examples, such things. Then the ingenuity of the plot, for example, in Shagundala, you can see that skeleton is taken from the Mahabharata, but Kalidasa has introduced the Mudra, the ring, then the episode of the fisherman and the curse, Durvasa, etc. And you can see what a beautiful change it has brought about for the play. Such things are there. in many such places in Sanskrit literature. And then there is integration of various segments. In Bhavudhi's Uttaramacharidam, Rama and Sita are looking at in the Chitrashala, and looking at one scene, Rama sees the Jrimbaga types of arrows, and he tells Sita, all these arrows will come to your sons, your children, when they are born. At that time, Sita is only pregnant. Later, what happens? Leva and Kusha are confronting Rama with the same Jrimbaga astras. And at that time, Rama remembers, how come that these guys got these very sacred these arrows? Then Rama remembers, I had given that vow to Sita. So he discovers, he recognizes his children. So this is something which has happened in the first act. Now Rama understands that in the second act, last act, Rama recognizes the relevance of that. All these are examples of contextual figurativeness. Now I have to rush. The last one is compositional figurativeness, Prabandha Vakrada. So the adaptation of a story from a well-known source, new emotional significance to added to old themes. The old story is something, in the Mahabharata, for example, you have got a story. Here, you want to Chandarasa, but in Kiradarjuniya, Bharavi has taken that story, and he wants to delineate the Veerarasa, and Arjuna as the hero. So he has taken it, and he has edited some portions. He has not dealt with the entire Mahabharata. He has focused on a particular episode to make Arjuna the hero. Then deletion of unnecessary episodes, development of even minor incidents into far-reaching episodes. And lastly, last but not the least, the very title of the composition. In the whole of Sanskrit poetics, it is only Kundaka who has spoken about the title of the composition. And Kundaka says that the genius of the poet, the stamp of the genius of the poet can be found in the very title. So there are two types of titles. One is flat title, like Malavika Agnimitram or Maladi Madhavam. That is Malavika and Agnimitra. Everybody will be able to understand. Vikramarvasi. But if you have got a title, Abhijnana Shagundalam, Shagundala recognized, Abhijnana of Shagundala, recognition, then what it will strike you, because there is something new. Nobody has thought about that. Then Mudra Rakshasa and the signet ring. So suddenly you will be surprised. So this type of Mrchakadigam, a little clay cart. So you do not know what is the poet going to speak about. So that is the genius of the poet, especially in drama. You make use of such things, and there are many other things in compositional figurativeness. But unfortunately, in the case of compositional figurativeness, Prabandha Vakrada and Prakarana Vakrada, we do not have the entire text of Kundaka in full form. There are many lacunae in the text, so it is very difficult for us to follow. But at the same time, whatever is left to us is surprising. It is something very remarkable. And if you study Vakrokti Jivita, you will be able to understand poetic language better. You will be able to understand and appreciate literature in a very extended sense. And that is the greatest contribution of Kundaka as an aesthetician. So in a nutshell, what I want to summarize what he has said. Kundaka says that poetry comes into being because of the creativity of the poet, and the pratibha of the poet, and this pratibha manifests itself as Vaichitriya in poetic language. This Vaichitriya you can understand at the Varna Vinyasa, Padapurvartha, then Pratyaya, then Vakya, Prakarana, and Prabandha levels. So you have to always look at all these 6 levels closely in order to understand the genius of the poet. And all these things are there to elicit aesthetic delight in the mind of the spectator. At that time, the spectator will be mesmerized, will be carried away by the beauty. Then unknowingly, the poet will be able to transform all instruction, whatever he wants to communicate unknowingly. Kanda Samhitadaya. Okay, this is the sum total of Kundaka's poetic theory, and I think I have to stop here because I have already taken some more time. Sorry for that. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah, you. Okay.
Yes, Susmita Ghosh has raised her hand. What is that? Yes. Is there any?
I think mistaken
5
letter.
minutes you can have for discussion, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So thank you so much, Professor Rajendran. Uh, Professor Parul Mukherji from JNU has raised her hand.
Okay.
Ma'am, please, if you.
Hello, Professor Rajendran. Very
Oh,
nice.
hello, Parul. So delighted to see you.
Yeah, same here. I really thoroughly enjoyed your talk, and I was
Thank you very
wondering
much.
that isn't it interesting that Kuntaka's very author-centric approach in the Indian context never paved the way for biographical understanding of poets.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We have to think about that. But probably we could develop Kuntaga's theory to comprise the biographical elements also, because I believe that poets have got a private language also with them, very intimate language. Some words may mean certain things to them. They are fond of repeating certain words. All these things can also be investigated using the tools of Kundaga. So that will be something new, but he does not envisage such a possibility. You are absolutely right about that. But having said that, I don't want to say that he has shut the door against this type of elements. But probably finding a correlation between the poet's life and literary output, that is according to Kundaga, that is not the way in which you can approach literature, because what the poet has left is the literature, and it will speak for itself. You need not bother about the biography, whether Shakespeare wrote all his tragedies at a particular tragic juncture in his own life. No, all these things are not our concern, according to. So that is why we speak about the death of the author also. All these things are there. So we have got is the literature. So there was a literary historian, Krishna Chaitanya, who once said that it is fortunate that we have got little biographical information of all great poets of Sanskrit, because we can concentrate on their works rather than deviating to other things. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for the interaction.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Anyone? If you have any query or questions regarding Professor Rajendran's speech today, please unmute yourself and ask. So, okay. Thank you, Professor Rajendran, for this wonderful lecture. I must say you have touched almost all 6 branches of Vakrata described by Kuntaka, the great poetician of Indian aesthetics. And you have also compared those Vakratas with ample examples and with the Western views like Eliot and others. So it's a great speech, I must say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sven. I have to excuse myself because I have got another presentation right
Absolutely.
now.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I wanted to hear the whole of this.
So
okay.
Lectures will be recorded, as I said earlier.
Please,
So
please. Please.
I'll send the link. Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Parul. Yeah.
Bye, Professor Rajendran.
Okay, now it's time to our second lecture. So, the second lecture of today's second academic session will be by Professor Bijoya Goswami, my teacher. Professor Goswami, let me introduce a small brief biodata. Let me tell a small brief biodata for all of you present here. Professor Vijaya Goswami is a retired professor of Sanskrit department of Jadavpur University. He was the former HOD, head of the Department of Sanskrit, Jadavpur University, former coordinator, Department of Special Assistance, DSA, of the same departments of the same university, former coordinator of CAS of the same university. Her specialization are Sanskrit literature and literary criticism mainly, and ancient Indian linguistics, Indian medicines, and the list goes on. Many books were published by her, and some are worth mentioning, like a critique of Alankaras in Rasagangadhara, two Bhagavatas and their contribution to Sanskrit poetics, the metaphor, a semantic analysis, Lalita Vistara, the wonderful book Lalita Vistara, English translation with notes, meaning and interpretation, Indian and Western aesthetics, an edited book, a comparative study, medicine and diet in ancient India, tragedy in Sanskrit literature, and so on. So now I request Madam Professor Vijaya Goswami to deliver her lecture and enlighten us. Her topic, the title of her topic or of her lecture is Horace and Indian Aesthetics. Madam.
Thank you, Soumyajit. I don't know how far I'll be able to do justice to the subject that has been allotted to me by my student Soumyajit. But I'm grateful to all of you to offer me a patient hearing. Actually, when we deal with aesthetics in the Indian context, we are faced with many facets of it at various texts. In the modern context, it has been considered more accurate by some scholars to speak of aesthetics as Saundarya Shastra. But more often, we speak of aesthetics as Nandana Tattva. Rather than a cultivation of beauty, it is a cultivation of the delight that we receive from the literary works. Basically, in art, it is not necessarily the beautiful which becomes an object of aesthetic appreciation or attention. As Paul Ziff has pointed out, that neither Grunewald's crucifixion nor Picasso's Guernica conform to the standard of beauty. These are not beautiful works, but they are by no means non-aesthetic or unaesthetic. The term Nandana Tattva is therefore, I think, more exact, although this expression too has not been explained satisfactorily over the ages. In the ancient Indian concept of rhetorics and dramaturgy, we find that even rasas like Bhayanaka, Vibhatsa, etc., which are intrinsically or Ramaniya or uncharming, they are still relished as rasas. As we know, rasyate iti rasa, all that is relished in creative works, that includes literature as well as art. Whatever is relished in that is rasa. The question of aesthetics all over the world still remains an open one. However, coming to Horace and why I chose him in comparing his work with Indian aesthetic theories. In my own career, When reading and teaching aesthetic principles, I have been struck by the similarities in ancient Indian aesthetic principles and those of the Western classical world, like those of Aristotle, Horace, Longinus, and others. I was particularly captivated at first glance by the ideas of Horace. Today, I'd like to elaborate on some of these. Horace, as we refer to him, or rather Quintus Horatius Flaccus, was born in 65 BC in Verusia in Apulia. He is well known for his odes, epodes, epistles, and satires. He is particularly remembered for one of his epistles, Epistula ad Pisones, better known as Ars Poetica or Poetic Arts. Rather, it was directed as a sort of letter to two young boys that he knew, two brothers, the sons of Lucius Piso. This work advises the two youths on the right way to create poetry and the things to avoid in writing poetry. The question we must deal with at first is, what is poetry? This question, subject to discussion over the centuries and all over the world, still remains a very major object of queries. By poetry, I refer to all forms of literature. As you know, in Sanskrit, the very term kavya refers to poetry, prose, drama, and all other kinds of literature. All genre of literature, prose, poetry, and mixed. Bharata in his Natyashastra has stated that Natya drama, which is a form of kavya itself, gives peace of mind and supramandan delight, supramandan bliss to mankind beset by troubles and travails. Dukhartanang, Shamartanang, Shokartanang tapasvinam, Vishranti jananang kale, Natyam etad bhavishyati. When Brahma creates the fifth Veda, this is what he prophesies for this fifth Veda, that it will be a comfort, it will be a relief when it is read or practiced by the people who are beset by so many troubles. Later writers find a practical and mundane use for poetry. Barma says that there are several benefits to be attained from poetry. Dharmartha kama moksheshu vaichakshanyam kalasu cha karoti kirting preeting cha sadhu kavya nishevanam. Good poetry generates expertise in the Chaturvargas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. It also generates expertise in arts. It brings fame to the poet, and on top of all these benefits, it brings preeti or pleasure. In centuries to come, the focus shifts to good advice to be acquired from poetry or imparted by poetry. But more important than this is still the element of pleasure. Mammata says, Kavyam yashase arthakrite vyavahara vide shvetarakshatay sadhyah paranirbritaye kanta sammita tayopadesha yuje. Poetry brings fame or yasha to the poet, as well as financial benefit, knowledge of the ways of the world, and removal of evil by imparting goodness or good advice or uttering the names of gods and goddesses. So far, except for the fame or financial advice, these benefits can also be shared by the reader. But also, he adds here, good advice such as Ramadivat Vartitabyang na Ravanadivat. One should act as Rama did, not as Ravana did, comes as more welcome coming from the lips of the beloved and more likely to be followed. it has been clarified by him that there are three kinds of advice. There are Prabhu Samhita, the one that comes from the master, that is something that must be followed. And Surit Samhita, that is the advice of a friend, which may or may not be followed, but will at least be more palatable than the Prabhu Samhita Upadesha. But finally, the Kanta Samhita Upadesha, that delivered by the beloved, is always most welcome, because it is gladly accepted by whoever takes the advice. The major benefit of poetry or literature, according to Mammata, however, is the Sadhya Paranirvriti, immediate attainment of supramundane bliss for both the reader and the poet. When we come to Horace, he follows the same principles. He says poets aim at giving either profit or delight, or by combining the giving of pleasure with some useful precepts of life. The man who has managed to blend profit with delight wins everyone's approbation, for he gives his reader pleasure at the same time as he instructs him. This is very akin to the advice, the analysis that Indian poeticians, rhetoricians give us. In evaluating poetry or any art, as we have already noted, the concept of beauty is a very ticklish issue. Beauty in this context has to do with being aesthetically proper, not just physically beautiful. Now, what makes for this propriety? Horace says, if the speaker's words are out of key with his fortunes, a Roman audience will cackle and jeer to a man. In order not to give a young man the characteristics of old age, or the child that of a grown man, we shall always dwell upon the qualities that are appropriate of a particular time of life. He has specified the kind of language or the kind of speech or behavior that a man should adopt should he be acting a part in a drama. If it is not it is not appropriate to the situation, all the audience will laugh to a man at the inconsistency.
Madam's voice is not audible, right? Anyone?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Okay, let me just check. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
I was cut off. Just a minute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
As I was saying, As I was saying, what Horace has spoken of is usually dealt with Indian aestheticians as auchitya or propriety, of speaker and speech is the controlling factor of poetry. And Dhvanikara has said, Tan niyame hetu rochityam vaktri vachayo. According to Dhvanikara, lack of propriety or decorum in poetry is nothing but the depiction of whatever makes for detraction from rasa. So there is a break in rasa, there is a destruction of rasa if we do not speak of use the principle of auchitya properly. Anuchitya drite nanyat rasabhangasya karanam prasiddhauchitya vandhastu rasasyopanishat para. Certainly, if a poet puts enough inappropriate speech into the mouth of a speaker, it will detract from rasa. It is not enough that poems should, if they are to carry the audience with them, they must also have charm as well. If your speeches are out of harmony with your feelings, I shall either fall asleep or burst out laughing, says Horace. On beginning his dissertation, he has said, supposing a painter chose to put a human head on a horse's neck, or to spread the feathers of various colors over the limbs of several different creatures, or to make what in the upper part of it is a beautiful woman tail off in a hideous fish, could you help laughing when he showed you his efforts? This, of course, is a little dicey in any case, because even in Greek mythology, we read of the centaur, who is a man with his lower part of his body is that of a horse and his head is that of a man, and that has been accepted in poetry. And mermaids are accepted in the mythology of many countries. Obviously, these are not inappropriate in poetry, but strangely enough, they compact with each other. Anyway, that is Horace's opinion. Coming further on to other matters, since the person who creates poetry is a poet, we will now concentrate on what really makes a poet, because that is the main principle of Horace's theories as he speaks to the Piso brothers. The term kavi in Sanskrit, as we know, refers to the poet, but also to something else. A kavi is someone endowed with extraordinary insight, something beyond the reach of common man. In the realm of poetry, the kavi is all-powerful. He can will matter to turn as he desires. As we find in the Agni Purana, apare kavya sansare kavireva prajapati yatha vai rochate vishwam tathedang parivartate. Indian aesthetics conceives of the poet as a person in whom the faculty of realizing the truth and faculty of giving expression to the truth realized combine. This description of the literary artist puts great emphasis on the faculty of imagination, which is, as a matter of fact, presents ever new coruscations of ideas before the poet and enables him to see all things as steeped in profound beauty. My teacher, Professor Ramanujan Mukherji, wrote that. What then is the facility the poet must possess in order to be a poet? The power of imagination is definitely a must, but the poetic genius is something more than mere imagination. Earlier writers have stressed the importance of genius from ancient times. Bahama says, Kavyam tu jayate jatu kasyachit pratibhavata. Poetry is created by someone who has pratibha, who has poetic genius. But mere poetic genius is apparently not enough. This is something that both Indian and Western scholars have stressed. As we have found, Horace says the question has been asked whether a fine poem is the product of art or nature. I myself cannot see the value of application without strong natural aptitude, or on the other hand, of native genius, unless it is cultivated. So true is it that each requires the help of the other, and they enter into a friendly compact with each other. These very opinion we find in the among the Indian thinkers. Like Dandin has to say, Dandi says in his Kavyadarsha, Naisargiki cha pratibha shrutam cha bahu nirmalam amandaschavi yogasya karanam kavya sampada. So what is at the bottom of kavya sampad, what causes kavya sampad is what, first of all, it is Naisargiki pratibha, it is natural genius, as well as shrutam bahu nirmalam, an intelligence which has been clarified, purified by learning, and amanda aviyoga, constant practice. These are causes of kavya sampad. Thus, a poet requires all three facets: natural genius, polished intellect, and unflagging practice. However, Dandi later seems to revise a part of his opinion. He says that a person who does not have normally have the poetic genius, natural genius that is necessary for creating poetry, he can try to acquire at least a part of that by constant devotion to work with the help of intellect and effort. That is, with the help of intellect and effort, he will acquire at least some sort of a genius, which, if not very creative, it may also help him. How will it help him? It will help him to be ranked among the intellectuals, in the sphere of intellectuals. Na vidyate yadyapi purvavasana gunanubandhi pratibhanam adbhutam Shrutena yatne chetna chapa vakupasita dhruvam karotyeva kamap anugraham. Tadasta tandrai anishang saraswati samadupasya khalu kirti mipsupi krite krita kavitvepi krishe kavitvepi jana kritashrama vidagdha goshchishu vihartum ishati. Why then is it so important to acquire learning and practice, or polished intellect and practice? Here we can go back to Aristotle, who says that poetry is actually a representation of reality. People enjoy seeing likenesses because in doing so they acquire information, they reason out what each represents and discover, for instance, that this is a picture of so-and-so. Indian rhetoricians too have their own way of thinking, but they have sometimes accepted part of this theory, but not always. As we saw that Barma believes, Kavyantu jayate jatu kasyachit pratibhadvata. Only a person with natural genius can become a poet. He also says that a knowledge of Shastras to someone who is not a poet is as useless as generosity in the poor man and garrulity in an ignorant person. But Mamoto insists that all these three must be present in a person if he is to become a successful poet. He says these three combined make the cause of poetry, not the three causes of poetry. Shakti Nipunata Lokashastra Kavyadya Vekshana Kavyagya Shikshaya Abhyasa iti hetus tadudbhave. He adds these three together, not any one factor alone make up the cause of poetry, and no single factor among them can be the cause of poetry. This agrees somewhat with Dundee's contention, but it differs totally from Dundee's view that even without genius, one can cultivate learning and practice to find among intellectuals. In that case, I hardly think that person can be termed a poet. But he has other points, other necessities, which we will be coming to. Talking of the interpretation of poetic powers, Vamana says there are two categories of poets. Arochakina Satrinabhyavaharinascha Kavaya. Poets are of two types. One is the discriminating one, the one who has aruchi, who cannot eat all kinds of food, as there are many human beings also. And the other says Satrinabhyavaharina, that is, they are they don't have discrimination, and they are like creatures that can eat even grass. Needless to say, the former is the true poet. The indiscriminate man cannot hardly be a good poet or a proper poet. Actually, Mangala, another proponent of the Riti school like Vamana, has said that rather applied these two categories to the Bhavaka or the converser. We shall come to the converser later on. But in the Kavya Mimamsa by Rajashekhara, we find this reference to Mangala, that he has said these two are two categories of not of poetic genius, but one of conversers or appreciators. But Vamana has very specifically said these are the two categories of poets. Rajashekhara has used this opinion to facilitate his own theory of two distinct varieties of genius, the Karaitri Pratibha or creative genius, and Bhavaitri Pratibha or appreciative genius. Vamana is quite decisive, as I said, on the point that both these are attributes of the poet. He says the former type can be instructed because they are Vivekin, they are discriminatory, and the latter type are not. Teaching, he says, has to be useful to this former category, but not to the latter. Horace says, the athlete who strains to reach the winning post has trained hard as a boy and put up with a great deal, sweating and shivering in the cold and keeping away from women and wine. The flautist who plays at the Pythian games has first had to learn his art under a stern master. This is what the Indian thinkers speak of as Bhutpatti and Abhyasa. Vamana has listed a number of factors leading to the acquisition of these assets, but I'm not going into details of that. But what we are coming to is that those who write poetry also need the help of Bhutpatti and Abhyasa. Otherwise, their raw genius is not going to help them. That is something also that Horace also agrees to. This brings us to the converser, the appreciator. Indian aesthetics gives us two very beautiful and evocative terms, Saridaya and Samajika. The Saridaya is one who has the same heart or feelings as that of the creator. That is to say, one shares in the feelings of the poet, the feelings of the dramatist, the feelings of the actors and actresses. Tolstoy has said, art is a human activity consisting in this, that one man consciously by means of certain external signs hands on to others feelings he has lived through, and that other people are infected by these feelings and also experience them. This is where we come to the Sahridaya. They have the same hearts, the appreciator and the creator. Coming to this, we find Abhinavagupta, who quotes his preceptor Bhattatauta. He says of Sahridaya, Jeshang kabhya bhasanu shilana vashat vishadi phute mano mukure varnaniya tanmai bhavana yogyata te hridaya sangvada bhaja Sahridaya. Those whose minds are made like mirrors, clear, through the practice of reading of poetry, so that they can reflect the subject of description and become one with it. They are called the Sahridayas. The Samajikas likewise are those who belong to the Samaja, the society, and also in the case of drama, the Samajikas are those who are watching the drama or the audience. So in art and literature, it is not just the creator who matters, but the converser or appreciator too, for it is he or she that is the consumer, without whom there is no art, there is no literature. When Indian rhetoricians speak of the purpose of poetry, they speak of the purposes itself, the benefits we can get from it. They recount the benefits that are enjoyed by both the author, the poet and the reader or the converser. When they speak of the Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha, these are to be obtained by both poets and conversers. Only the fame and financial benefit are solely for the poet. And the unlimited bliss, the Sadhya Paranirvriti, is it belongs to both of them, both the poet and the reader or an audience or whatever. According to Rajashekhara, there is very little distinction between the poet and the converser or critic. Yet others are of the opinion that an individual who is both a poet and a critic is always in a more favorable situation, but others feel that these are the results of two different types of genius and cannot be the same. One type of rock contains gold and the other is used to test it. Regarding the various types of poetic genius, this is discussed in the science known as Kavi Rahasya, and we can say the work by Horace, that is Ars Poetica or Epistula de Pisones, is a sort of Kavi Rahasya in the Western world. Rajashekhara points out that according to the categories of Sahaja, Aharya and Upadishiki, there are three categories of poets too: Saraswata, Abhyasika and Upadeshika. There are some poets who are natural poets who need not be taught extra poetic tricks. There are Aharya who acquire genius, and Upadeshiki, those who can be advised on the writing of poetry. In fact, I think we have read instances of all these kinds of poetry. in Sanskrit literature, there are so many types of poets, and so many of them can belong to these categories. Like poets like Kalidasa, of course, cannot be put in any other category except Sahaja, but the Abhyasika and Upadeshika, I think all the Shastra Kavis, most of the Shastra Kavis, like Bharavi, Magha, Bhatti, they fall into these categories. But Horace does not make this fine distinction. However, most of the time we find Alankarikas stress on the fact that without any kind of natural genius, writing poetry is not possible. A certain degree of knowledge or polishing of the intellect is of course necessary, and practice certainly. These are very important, but natural genius is something that poetry or a poet cannot do without. Writing bad poetry is an unpardonable sin, as Bhamha says, akavitvam adharmaya vyadhe dandanaya cha kukavitvam punah shakshat mriti mahur manishi. If one writes, if one does not write poetry, if one is not a poet, if one is a non-poet, then one may acquire adharma or illness or punishment for doing or not doing something. But if you are a bad poet, that is comparable to death. And Banabhatta compares the hundreds of bad poets to dogs and the true poets to sharavas. Santi Shwana Iva Sankhya Jati Bhajo Grihe Grihe Utpadaka Na Bahava Kavaya Sharavhaiva. Sharavas are very rare beasts, so true poets, proper poets are very rare. Even Anandavardhana has said that in this world, the poets, there are in this world of infinite variety, there are only 2 or 3 or possibly 5 or 6 Mahakavis, such as Kalidasa. I think this sorry, the net is been very is constantly being interrupted. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, madam. Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, when we speak of bad poets, so far we find that natural genius is the last word to a poet. Then most poets, most rhetoricians we find have dealt with faults in poetry. Horace has said, however, there are faults that we should be ready to forgive. For the lute string does not always give the note intended by the hand, but often returns a high note when a lower one is required. When there are plenty of fine passages in a poem, I shall not take exception to occasional blemishes which the poet has carelessly let slip, or which his fallible human nature has not guarded against. At the same time, I am put out with the worthy Homer nods. This is Horace's opinion that it is not always that a poet is perfect. Even a good poet may make some errors, which can be forgiven because the rest of the poem is in a superlative category. But very excellent poets, the highest type of poets like Homer, cannot afford to make any mistake. So what do the Indian rhetoricians say? Anandavardhana says, if a poet makes a mistake out of ignorance, he can cover it up if he has a genius, but an error due to lack of genius cannot be covered up. Avyutprati krito dosha shaktya sangriyate kavi yasvu ashakti kritastasya sa jhatityeva avabhasate. This brings us to more or less the end of my lecture, and where I would like to point out, if I haven't succeeded in doing so far, that when we speak of Western scholars or Indian scholars, it makes no difference if the scholar is Indian or is from one of the Western countries. We see that their ideas match very much, very closely, and what Horace has said is something that our aestheticians also say, starting from Bharata down to say Jagannatha, we find the same ideas being mooted in India as in the West. It is like the sun. We say the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but actually the sun does neither rises nor sets. It is the earth's turning that makes us think that the sun is sinking in the west or rising in the east. So the east and west here can meet, and I think as far as aesthetics and literature is concerned, there is much that these two extremities have in common, and that I think is a very heartening thought, that in such a large world we have something in common with other people of other countries. I think I've gone on long enough. Now I will end my speech, and if there is any questions or queries or discussions, I'd be very glad to take part in them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, madam, for your lecture, wonderful lecture. And you have talked about the propriety in poetry, causes of poetry, purposes of poetry, subject and diction of poetry, faults of poetry, and other views of poetry from both the Indian and Western perspective, specifically from the Horatian perspective. I think, madam, Horace's success as a poet, as he was also a poet, success as a poet can be measured uh, partly by how difficult he is to imitate and translate. You must be agree with me that he is very difficult to imitate or translate, and by how many uh, admirers have sought to do both. So
That is right.
yes, I want to say also that it was Professor Goswami who taught me this comparative aesthetics at Jadavpur University. Thank you so much, madam, for your illuminating lecture. It must be beneficial for my students and other guests present here. Now I request my audience to if you have any queries or questions, please ask, or you can write on the in call messages box also.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, how
Please
Indian
introduce yourself first and then ask. Thank you.
Ma'am, I'm Arpita Paul, PhD research scholar at Patna University. My question is, how Indian aesthetics differ from Western aesthetics? Some simple points.
Actually, what I was talking about was basically about this. I don't think there is much difference. And if you have the opportunity of reading the at least the older writers of Western aesthetics, you'll find many points of agreement. And of course, in modern times, this is even more noticeable. And that is exactly what I was talking about when I said that the sun rising in the east and setting in the west does not make the east and the west so much different from each other.
Yes, if anyone wants to know further about this specifically on Horace, I must say that Professor Bijoya Goswami's two articles I remember that were in Anviksha Journal of Jadavpur University Department of Sanskrit, that titled titled Horace and Concepts of Sanskrit Poetics. Another one is Horace and Indian Poetics. You will find this.
It's
Yes.
a single article, but it was split in two issues.
Yes.
But I think if the person who just asked the question is interested, she might read another work by myself and
Shiuli
Dr.
Madam.
Shiuli Basu, Indian and Western Aesthetics, a Comparative Study.
Yes.
I've been able to deal with it in more detail there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Orpita and Madam. If anyone any questions or queries. I think there are none.
I think they're all leaving also.
So thank you, Madam. Thank you for your time and your lecture. Thank you so much for being with us and for accepting my invitation in short notice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Soumyajit.
Thank you. And now we have had a session of paper presentations, but unfortunately, the presenter is not available or with us today. She informed me that she will not be able to be here with us and present her paper. So there is no more presentations today. There are two presentations, paper presentations tomorrow, and two lectures in the third academic sessions tomorrow. So I by paying tribute or expressing my gratitude to Professor C. Rajendran and my teacher Professor Goswami, I conclude here and ends today's session, today's second academic sessions here. We will meet tomorrow at the same time, that is 1 p.m. tomorrow in the third and last academic session. Thank you so much for your patient listening and well behaved. I must say you are all well behaved, well mannered audience. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow at the same time and with the same link also. Thank you so much.